Episode 1. Baby Bigfoot in my barn. The forest last night was alive with voices that didn't belong to men. The wind tore through the trees like a chorus of wandering souls, howling, crying, whispering. Inside his old ranch house, Elias Walker sat in silence, listening. For 10 long years he had lived alone. No wife, no children, no neighbors, no laughter. Only the creak of wood and the cold breath of winter storms to remind him that he was still alive. But when dawn crept over the horizon, and Elias stepped down to his barn expecting the familiar rhythm of horses and hay, he found something else entirely. The straw had been torn apart, the trough lay overturned, and in the snow, a half-eaten apple rolled red against the frost. Elias's hand clenched his rifle, his pulse thundered. And then, he saw it. Curled up in the hay, small arms wrapped around that stolen apple was a creature he had only heard of in fearful whispers. Fur the color of autumn leaves. A face too wild to be human, yet too innocent to be a beast. A baby Bigfoot. Elias froze, his breath caught in his chest. The rifle shook in his grip. One pull of the trigger and the nightmare would end. One pull and the legend would remain nothing more than rumor. But then the child stirred. Its eyes opened wide, glassy, shimmering with fear and hope all at once. Not a monster's glare, not the eyes of a predator, the eyes of a child lost and longing for protection. And in that moment, Elias understood, not every shadow is born to haunt us. Some shadows are born to protect. And this is only the beginning. Because over the next 10 episodes, you will walk with Elias through fire and storm, through hunts and betrayals, through loss and healing. You will see legends collide with human fear, and you will witness a covenant that could change everything we thought we knew about Bigfoot. Subscribe now and stay with us through this journey, because this isn't just one story. It's the beginning of a legend. Part 1. The Discovery. Elias stood frozen at the threshold of his barn. The first pale light of dawn spilled through the cracks in the wooden boards, painting thin golden lines across the cold dirt floor. His breath clouded the air, mingling with the damp scent of old timber and straw. His hand gripped the rifle, tight finger trembling on the trigger. But in front of him, nestled in the hay, the small creature slept on peaceful, unguarded, as if the whole world had forgotten its dangers. Elias's pulse pounded in his ears. Since boyhood, he had heard the stories whispered around campfires and in the corners of taverns, a beast half-man, half-shadow prowling the forest on stormy nights, stealing cattle, snatching children, haunting dreams. They called it by many names: the forest giant, the hairy monster, the dark one. He had laughed once, scoffing at those tales, but now that legend was lying right here in his barn. And it was small, vulnerable, almost human. The little ears twitched. The creature stirred. Slowly its eyes opened, large, brown, wet eyes glistening like they had always held back tears. It looked straight at Elias. There was no malice, no hunger, no predator's glare, only fear, confusion, and something that felt painfully close to hope. The rifle weighed heavy in his hands, but suddenly it felt useless, absurd. His arms lowered the barrel, sinking toward the ground. For just an instant he saw not a creature of myth, but the memory of a boy. His boy, the son he had buried 10 winters ago. The image struck him like a blade cutting deeper than any claw could. Behind him, a fragile voice broke the silence. "Oh God, it's just a child." Elias spun. At the doorway stood the woman the forest itself had delivered days ago, still pale, still weak from her wounds. Her hand covered her mouth, her eyes wide in disbelief. "You see it too," Elias rasped, throat dry. She swallowed hard, voice trembling. "Last night, I heard it. A cry in the storm, like a mother calling for her child. Maybe it was lost." The words echoed inside Elias like a drumbeat. If she was right, somewhere beyond those trees, a towering beast was still searching, desperate and enraged. The thought chilled him to the bone. But when he turned back, those small brown eyes still clung to his, wide and pleading. The creature hugged its half-eaten apple tighter the way a frightened child might clutch a rag doll. And in that moment, Elias no longer felt like a man staring down a monster. He felt like a father confronted with a child who had no one else. The barn seemed to fall utterly silent. No sound but the whistle of wind through the cracks, the restless shifting of his horses, and the relentless pounding of Elias's own heart. And in that silence, Elias knew something had changed. He had crossed a line. His life, once marked by grief and solitude, had been turned onto a path from which there would be no return. Part 2. The Lost Child. The morning crept on in uneasy silence. Elias no longer carried his rifle. Instead, he sat at the edge of the stall, a dim lantern flickering beside him. Its light spilled across the straw, catching every dust mote in the air. In his hands, he held a tin cup of water. Carefully, he slid it toward the small creature huddled in the hay. At first, the little one recoiled, clutching its half-eaten apple, tighter chest rising and falling in quick, shallow breaths. But curiosity soon outweighed fear. It leaned forward, sniffed the rim, and clumsily tipped the cup. Water splashed down its fur, and it sneezed, a sharp, startling sound that broke the tension. Elias let out a rough, rusty laugh. It had been years since he had heard his own voice make that sound. The little creature blinked wide-eyed, as though confused by the noise, then went back to nibbling its apple. From the doorway, the woman stepped carefully inside, steadying herself against the wooden frame. Her voice was soft, almost reverent. "I told you. I heard it last night. Not rage, not fury. It was a cry, a mother's cry, calling for her child." Her words cut deep. Elias's jaw tightened. Somewhere out in those dark woods, a massive beast, feared by every villager, might be searching frantically for this little one. The thought made his blood run cold. Yet when he turned back, he saw only those eyes. Eyes that clung to his round and trembling, holding tight to that apple like it was the only safe thing left in the world. And in that gaze, Elias no longer felt like a man staring down a monster. He felt like a father facing a child with no one else to turn to. The woman lowered herself closer to the hay, her knees bending slowly. She extended her hand, palm-open fingers steady despite her trembling breath. The small creature froze. Its gaze darted from her hand to her face. For one long heartbeat, the barn itself seemed to hold its breath. Then, with hesitant steps, the little one shuffled forward. Tiny furred fingers brushed against her palm, quick, fleeting, before snatching back again. But that brief touch was enough. A bridge had been built. The woman's face softened into a smile, tears welling in her eyes. "It isn't a monster," she whispered. "It's a child, and it's afraid." Elias turned away, hiding the storm rising in his chest. He wanted to deny it, to cling to the old tales, to the simplicity of fear. But each glance, each trembling movement, each fragile sound from the little creature tore those defenses down. The barn felt warmer now, not from the lantern, not from the pale light of morning, but from something Elias had thought long dead, the fragile warmth of life asking silently to be protected. For 10 long years, this ranch had felt like a tomb. But now, between the horses' restless snorts, the quiet breath of the woman nearby, and the wide, fearful eyes of the baby Bigfoot, Elias realized something had broken the silence at last. Part 3. The return night fell quickly in the mountains. Darkness swallowed the ranch, leaving only the faint glow of a lantern burning inside the barn. Elias sat against the wooden wall, the lantern trembling in his hands, eyes fixed on the small creature curled in the hay. The baby Bigfoot stirred, shifting, then settled again, its tiny chest rising and falling with soft breaths. Then the silence shattered. A low, thunderous growl rolled in from the tree line. The horses reared in panic, hooves clattering against the floorboards. Elias froze, blood turning to ice. That sound was not wind. It was not wolves. It was something larger, something he had dreaded since morning. He stepped out onto the porch, and there, at the edge of the clearing, under the silver wash of moonlight, loomed a massive shadow, the mother. Her towering frame glistened with snow, her fur matted by storm and cold. Eyes burned like embers in the dark, fixed squarely on the barn. Her presence was overwhelming, raw, primal, undeniable. Elias's grip tightened on the lantern, his heart hammering so violently it hurt. Instinct screamed at him to run, to hide, to raise his rifle, but all he could do was stand there waiting. And then a cry. From inside the barn, the little one awoke with a desperate wail. In an instant, it scrambled to its feet, tiny hands pushing against the straw legs, pounding across the wooden floor. Before Elias could react, the baby Bigfoot darted through the open door, racing straight into the dark. What happened next seemed to slow time itself. The small body leapt into the arms of its mother. The towering beast scooped the child close, clutching it against her chest with a sound that was half growl, half sob. Her cry echoed through the clearing, not of rage, but of pain and relief. Elias stood rooted, breath shallow, waiting for the strike that would end him. He braced for claws, for fury, for death, but it never came. Instead, the great creature turned, her glowing eyes locked onto his, and in them Elias saw not just fear or fury, but something else: recognition, gratitude. The world seemed to hold its breath. Snow drifted silently between them. The forest whispered. And then, slowly, deliberately, the mother bowed her head. A gesture so simple yet so profound it stole the breath from his lungs. Not a threat, not a warning, a thank you. Elias's chest tightened, his eyes blurred. For 10 years grief had kept him caged, but in this moment he felt seen, acknowledged by a legend. The woman stepped from the cabin, her hand over her mouth, tears glistening down her cheeks. Together they watched the mother and child retreat into the trees. Their silhouettes melted into the forest, swallowed by shadows and moonlight, leaving the ranch quiet once more. Elias lowered his head and whispered into the cold night. Not every shadow is meant to haunt us. Some shadows are born to protect. And deep within his chest, he knew this was not the end. It was only the beginning. The forest had marked him, tied him to something greater, and it would never let him go. The ranch fell quiet again. The snow kept falling soft and endless, erasing the tracks of the mother and her child as though they had never been there. But Elias knew the truth. He had seen it with his own eyes, felt it in his bones. For 10 years, his life had been nothing but silence, grief, and shadows. Tonight, that silence was broken. Tonight, the shadows revealed something he had never expected: trust, gratitude, even love. He stood on the porch long after the forest swallowed them, lantern flickering in his hand. The woman joined him, silent tears still on her cheeks. Neither spoke, for words were too small for what had just passed between man and legend. At last, Elias whispered into the night. Not every shadow is meant to haunt us. Some shadows are born to protect, and he knew it was true. This was no ending. It was the beginning of a story the world had forgotten, and one he could no longer turn away from. This is only episode 1 of a 10-part journey. In the episodes to come, you'll witness hunts in the dead of night, the heartbreak of loss, the whisper of ancient covenants, and the fragile bond between humans and legends that might just heal them both. Subscribe now and stay with us through the Bigfoot series, because every shadow in these woods hides a story, and the next chapter begins soon.